Good morning. Hi, Shereen,
Hi.
and
Hi.
welcome to all of our attendees today. Good morning.
Mhm.
Usually we do these webinars in the evening, but I was excited to do a morning one. I thought maybe we'd capture some people who think differently in the morning, have a bit of space and time.
Exactly.
And we've all woken up to another winter morning, so it's a great day to talk about wellness through winter. I haven't been outside yet, though. This is such a interesting winter to see if it's a spring winter day or a really cold winter day. But anyway, here we are. I see some familiar names. Some of you have joined us for these webinars before. Some of you might be new. My name is Nicole Imgrund, and I'm the owner and director of Rivers Edge Counseling Center. And this webinar this morning is part of a series of webinars, our Wellness Matters webinars. We have about 80 or 90 of these recorded now, and they're all on our website. So I encourage you to look anytime and take advantage of those resources. And of course, to join us for any webinars that we have. I'll let you know about a couple of upcoming ones. We still have a pretty full winter and spring ahead. In a couple of weeks, we have one called Mindfulness Across Spiritual and Psychotherapeutic Traditions. We have the process of addiction, unconscious bias, body positivity or body neutrality, one on self-compassion, and also one on self-care for care partners. So really full winter, spring, and we hope you'll be able to join us for some other webinars as well. Our presenter this morning is Kjariene Seymour. Kjariene is a registered psychologist. Have you been with Rivers Edge about 3 years now, Kjariene?
I
It
think
feels
so.
like
Yeah.
longer, but I think
Yes, I think it's about 3 years. Yeah.
yeah. Now, Kjariene has been a psychologist since I think about 2012. So one of our very experienced psychologists. Kjariene works with kids. She works with teens, adults who have all sorts of presenting problems, and also with couples. So she works with wide variety of people. And Kjariene says that it is important to her to provide a safe, warm, and authentic space for people to explore, heal, and create positive change in their lives. Through working collaboratively together, therapy can create a catalyst and foundation for change. She enjoys supporting and connecting with people of all ages with a wide range of issues and seeing a positive outcome that we can create together. We're really fortunate to have Kjariene on our team, and I feel very fortunate to have her with us this morning to help guide us through all of what's left of winter, however long that still is. I'm really looking forward to this. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Kjariene, if you want to screen.
Sure.
I'll just note that
Mhm.
presentation will be maybe a little bit under the hour. We might have some time for questions. So feel free to use the chat or the Q&A function, and we can address some of them at the end. If there's any technical issues, I will be here looking at that. And with that, I think we can proceed.
Sounds good. And I'm really grateful that Nicole's going to handle the technical side of things. That's not my forte at all. And yes, thank you for attending, and we'll start the presentation. It's magic. Okay. I'm just going to go down to the bottom. From beginning. Sorry, I have to remind myself always to have patience with myself as much as I tell people as well that I see. So wellness through winter, and thanks for joining us. This is something that comes up quite a bit. Of course, during the winter time, it's challenging. It's a challenging season for many people. When I was looking, I was trying to figure out, and this is kind of the overview of what we'll talk about today. So do a little bit of an introduction. Then we'll talk about common triggers that happen in the winter, some coping and strategies that you can try. We'll try some exercises during the presentation, and then also maybe some indications that you might need more support in areas where it might be indicators that more support is needed beyond the scope of what we're talking about in the webinar today. and then some final thoughts and questions. In terms of winter, I was actually surprised there were 11% of Canadians who mentioned that winter was their favorite season, although there's a lot of great things in winter, and we can usually tap into that as well. There's things that we can only do in winter, or most of us can only do in winter, unless we ski in Saudi Arabia. And so, but most times it's a challenging season. It's very long. And I was actually trying to find some interesting quotes about winter, and it was a bit of a struggle because most of them just talked about you have to get through winter in order to have the coming of spring, and trying to negate winter altogether. Or a lot of them were like very, very flowery about winter, and I can tap into that too. But when there's really cold days, or cars don't start, or sick kids at home, I'm not able to tap into those things as well. So I didn't really find a quote that I really loved about winter, but maybe many of you do have a favorite quote about winter. It's a challenging season in challenging times. In our world right now, there are many challenging times in our province, in our country, in the world at large. And I think most of us coming off of the pandemic, which was quite a huge season of its own, and then facing winter, and we have such long winters, it can be a real challenge to not only our physical health and our mental health, but just holistically as people. It's quite a difficult season for many people to get through, and it brings up many things. Oftentimes mental health symptoms can worsen during winter months. Sometimes it's related to things such as seasonal affective disorder, but more likely it is the underpinnings of depression or anxiety or other things that come up, or family dynamics that come up during holiday times that tend to trigger things for us during the winter. So let's look at some of the common triggers. Obviously, we know that cold is associated with winter, although we've had a very strange winter, as Nicole is alluding to. We've had some really mild winter temperatures, and if I was doing this presentation on the weekend, it wouldn't seem as authentic because it was actually pretty spring-like and we've noticed a lot of spring-like weather this winter. It's been different. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a very long season in Canada, particularly. And what we notice is less light. That tends to affect how our circadian rhythms are adjusted. And that affects our sleep-wake cycle in quite a significant way. And just the change in our sleep-wake cycle and sunlight has quite an impact on mental health and physical health. And it's difficult. In some ways, we can boost some of our vitamin D levels, but that on its own oftentimes doesn't bring about the change that we need during winter as a challenge. Winter also gives us a time to, on the negative side of winter, it gives us a lot more time to focus on thoughts and feelings that maybe we were distracted by during the spring, summer, or fall, which tend to be the favorite seasons for most Canadians. And it kind of falls almost into even category there. It's kind of like 25 to 30% of Canadians pick the other seasons as their favorite season. And I think fall actually won out last year as the favorite season. But in the wintertime, there's a lot more time indoors. There's a lot more time where we might not be able to connect because of bad weather, or because there's just, because it's a shorter day, because of various factors that winter brings. So there's more time to focus on thoughts and feelings of sadness or grief or isolation or loneliness. And then because it's such a busy time of year, it generally, for many people who celebrate the holidays, there's a lot of stressors. There's a lot of stressors around family or friend dynamics, or being lonely and missing people at that time of year, and feeling that in a much bigger way at those times of year. And we're already feeling stressed, and we're already feeling, some level of sadness, or feeling a bit more withdrawn. The combination can be quite difficult for many people. There's also the post-holiday letdown. When I was reading to prepare for the webinar, something that did not surprise me was that what people will say is the worst time of year for them to experience is January through March. And we're in the middle of it. So I guess on a positive note, we're halfway there. On a negative note, we still have a ways to go. And we know that realistically, it's usually through to April that we have, but we at least have the anticipation of spring when we get into April. Towards the end of April, early May, we tend to have that. Although it's not unknown to have a snowstorm that reminds us quite sharply that winter is here and doesn't want to let go. Motivation and inertia are also big things that come up during winter. We generally don't feel as motivated as we did because maybe of the stress, because of the weather, because it's more isolating. Our motivation takes a hit and inertia sets in. And inertia, as we know, is what you're currently doing is what you're going to continue to do. And if we're having difficulties in getting motivated to do things, we might stay in that state for longer periods of time, especially during winter. So let's talk about some coping and strategies that we could try. And some of these might be things that many of you are doing already. Some of this, it's interesting because as I was preparing myself, I was thinking, there's some things I could actually brush up on here too. So it's, teach, not necessarily as I do in this way, but it's a good reminder for myself as well, that there are other things to pay attention to. Some of it is about getting back to basics. And sometimes we lose sight of that when we get really busy and overwhelmed and there's a lot going on. But sleep routine is really important when it comes to maintaining health in general, but especially when we're having a more challenging time. Getting enough sleep, waking up and going to bed at consistent times, creating sleep routine to ease ourselves into sleep. These are all things that can be very helpful. And there is something called sleep hygiene, which sounds a little different, but it's basically trying to clean up your routine relative to falling asleep and staying asleep, because that once the sleep cycle goes off kilter, it does have a profound impact on mental health. For people who do struggle with depression and anxiety coming into winter season, they have to be even more vigilant in so many ways, especially about sleep, because not getting enough sleep, most people that I've worked with will notice a significant increase. And it doesn't take much. It can be losing just the smallest amount of sleep, or I slept in and my rhythm was off for a week or more. Usually there's drastic changes. We don't think much of it. I'll just sleep in for an hour on the weekend, but it has a really big impact sometimes for how we feel. And we can almost feel like we're in a fog, or worse yet, building on a big sleep debt. And most of us have a big sleep debt, unfortunately. So strategies to try and work on sleep might be really helpful to consider. Eating as well as we can. Eating as healthy a way as we can. We all know these things. Of course, there's always times where there could be improvements, I'm sure, to most people's diets. Although I met somebody the other day where they've eaten no sugar and no carbs and no anything for a very long time. And and they feel much better. I'm certainly not, that might not be for everybody. I don't think it would work very well for me personally, but there are things that we can do that can change our mood and can have an impact on how we feel. So that might be something to consider as well. Having a regular routine, as much as I think we would like to imagine that we would like the freedom to just do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. And certainly those are nice experiences to have on vacations and other things, but we're generally people that do better. We do better as people with routine. Having things that we're expected to do, having a routine of what to expect for our bodies. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And as much as we might fight sometimes the maybe feeling fenced in by that, it actually gives us grounding, and it gives us an anchor for our day. And sometimes that can be really hard when routines are changed. For example, when people maybe they need to take a period of time off of work for their mental health, which does come up quite a bit. But still, it's important to have some sort of routine, some sort of expectation of what someone is going to be doing during the day. They will do better than someone who doesn't have that. It makes us feel very lost sometimes when we don't have a routine. Exercise is really important, and in whatever way you like it. I think that, exercise for some people like yoga, some people don't. Some people like walking, some people don't. Some people like running, some people don't. So embrace whatever activity form that feels good for you, and and whatever fits in your life the best. For some people, that might be doing a quick walk a couple of times a day because they can't fit in a gym routine. But being active absolutely has an impact on how we feel. Vitamin D is something that I was reading articles on this because, of course, when you're researching things about winter wellness, seasonal affective disorder gets mentioned many times. And the recommended dose changes depending on which article you read, but they say between 400 and 800 units to 1,000 units. That's what most of the articles indicate. I know there were some other practitioners, holistic practitioners, that actually recommend much higher doses of vitamin D. So, taking vitamin D in the amount that feels comfortable with you, with the trusted professionals that you consult with, that's what I would recommend. Connecting with others. It's so important at all times of the year, but it's almost like, in some ways we need extra reminders during the winter because there are a lot of things that tend to keep us more housebound. And oftentimes people do feel a little more housebound. So finding ways to connect with others, whether it is through Zoom or whether it's through texting or whether it's calling, or even better, actually being able to share space and share activities with others in person. When it's safe and when everybody's well, those things are great. And they're actually much more meaningful, usually, for most people than other forms of communication. In terms of other things to consider is being present. And I know that phrase gets said a lot, but being present with what is right now. And what is and right now. It really, what I'm trying to get across there is that I think sometimes we're anticipating a different season, but sometimes, and that can be nice. We can look forward to the days where we're too warm as opposed to too cold. But there's also a lot of wonderful things in winter that we can embrace right now. And sometimes being more, what are the things that I can experience in February that I can't experience in July? What are the things that I might actually miss? I won't miss these aspects, the negative aspects of winter, but there might be other things that I do miss. And so kind of tapping into the enjoyment of now, of what you can get out of winter. Just notice walks are something that I call when it's just walking around, because I was finding that winter walks, especially with my young sons, they can be quite bleak. It's the white winter landscape by the creek that we love, with all the trees. A lot of the birds have gone other places. There's not a lot of wildlife to see. And it was getting to be very routine. And some of the work became about just notice anything that captured our eyes. That was something that was interesting about our walk. And that became the challenge. And so it was noticing that, today the snow is in that state where it glitters like diamonds. And look how it looks like it's flowing silver all the way along the path, all the way back to our house, because of the way the sun is hitting the walks. And one of us would start, and then we would all share different things that we would just notice. It gave us a different level of feeling about going on a walk. And it might have that impact for you as well. But it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about a walk. It can be just noticing as you're doing your errands. things that you may not have noticed before, places that you'd like to see or you'd like to visit. Not part of the errand that you're maybe doing, but something that might have caught your eye that you like. Just keeping mindful of that. Switching the script is really about trying to switch what most of us, and I'm guilty of this too, do with winter. If it's a tough time to get the car started or load the car, and this actually happened to me last week. I dropped my groceries in the snow. That was great. And I got to pick up a bunch of groceries and dust the snow off. And I imagine there were some words, as I said, I can't really remember, but I was irritated. And switching the script means trying to change to a different mindset in the moment. At any point, we can stop whatever script is running through our minds and switch it to something else. And we can switch the channel to, I'm hoping I have a better day, or I am hoping that, I'm looking forward to when winter is done. We can even say that, but it's switching the script. I'm looking forward to a better moment. Embracing self-care. Self-care is a term that gets said a lot. Sometimes, in fact, it could be really triggering for a lot of people, because when you ask about self-care, I think a lot of us, if we're being honest, don't necessarily do a lot of self-care, or we're not even sure if we ever have, or we used to, but we've fallen out of it in some ways. Embracing self-care through the winter sometimes gives us something to anchor to, because this is a great time to engage in some self-care activities. If the weather is bad, you can do some things that you wouldn't normally have time necessarily to do when you're busy in other seasons, like the spring or the summer or the fall. And so maybe rethinking some of what are the things that I could do that would fill me up in a meaningful way. And that might be different for any person. For one person, it might feel good to, I just picked up some pictures here. For some people, it might be reading a book or having a cup of tea, which are very kind of wintry comfort things to do, but they can be done at any time of year. But maybe it becomes finding those things that are helpful in order to cope. Sometimes when enough of these are built, that actually adds up to something more. One on its own, maybe not, but many together can. So that kind of leads into the next point. I'm sure most of you have heard about, there was kind of a trend a few years ago, and it's still a buzzword, about hygge, which is, being Scandinavian myself, I'm quite familiar with that. There's candles in the window and having that feeling of candles all around and gathering with friends and trying to make a nest, trying to make your environment as comfortable as possible. And sometimes that can be a great idea in winter as well. Sometimes, even though it sounds maybe a little bit different, and maybe you've experienced this too, it can feel really nice to look at the bluster of outside and see a big snowstorm and know that you're warm and comfortable inside your house. And maybe you even have a blanket, and maybe you have something to read, and maybe you feel like you're having your own little snow day, which I think we get completely gypped on as Canadians, because I remember as a kid, there were no snow days. I don't remember ever having a snow day, but in the States, it's very popular. And I wish it was more popular here to have snow days. But maybe you could create your own, a time where you can just enjoy being warm and comfortable in the place where you're living and making your environment as comfortable as possible. Knowing that I don't have to go outside right now, and I don't have to drive in the conditions right now. Sometimes that can be a really comforting thought. 5 minutes to somewhere. I'm not sure really what to call this other than this, because it doesn't really matter where you go. But sometimes part of bursting through motivation and the inertia that can happen is just saying, I can go for 5 minutes. Anybody can go for a walk most times, unless you're feeling really unwell, and then of course don't, or if you're injured or something like that. But most people can go out and do an activity for 5 minutes, but with the understanding that they're free to go back when the 5 minutes is done. They don't have to do more than 5 minutes. So 5 minutes might take them around their block. 5 minutes might take them down to an interesting little library share place down the street that they didn't notice before. Generally, if you can get past that motivation to get through that first 5 minutes, most people don't come back after 5 minutes. If you do, you do. But most people, once they get going and they engage in the activity, they tend to keep doing that activity because 5 minutes might not seem like enough. Another way to think of this sometimes that I like, because I really love music, is to think about a song or two. I'll go out for a song or two. And because getting outside, getting out in the community, getting outside of your house is really important when we're talking about coping and winter. And some days it's harder than others. I remember last winter, and we had a period of cold this winter too, but 5 minutes is doable. If you're dressed appropriately, 5 minutes is doable, and it's actually really good to get on the fresh air. I'm certainly not advising anybody who has any health concerns, but to do that. But you can see some really cool sundogs around the sun when it's really, really cold. And as long as it's just 5 minutes, and actually something that we've done as a family, I don't know if other people kind of wonder about us, that's okay, because that's up to other people, is we actually drive to a beautiful point on a walk. And then we go 5 minutes and then we get back into our car and drive back when it's really cold. Otherwise we walk there. But when it's really cold, you don't necessarily want to be out for really long periods of time. So there's other ways you can think about it in order to see some beauty and to get outside. Gratitude and spreading kindness. This sometimes taps in for people and sometimes doesn't. There's a lot of people that are really good in the world, but sometimes it's hard if we're feeling like we just don't have anything left to give. It can be hard to get to a grateful place. But if you're able to tap into that, it can be very helpful. I am grateful for whatever, and I'm sure and don't engage in it if it doesn't speak to you or it doesn't connect with you, but it can be very helpful to kind of mentally note or actually write out the things that you're grateful for. And it might be things that are not that hard to come up with. It could be really easy. So you might want to start with, say, 5 things. And there might not, if it's really struggle, maybe leave it. But for most people, coming up with 5 things might be quite doable. And when we start noticing the things that we're grateful for, it also changes the script again to what we're focusing on. And that sometimes has a big impact on how we feel. Spreading kindness, I mean, that can be in anything that we do. Sometimes when we're not feeling well, something that can bring us out of that. And I think a lot of people who are maybe watching this webinar and maybe have experienced this, that sometimes when we give to others, it gives to us so much more. That's not the reason why we give. We don't give just to get. That's not the purpose of giving. But, it was interesting when we were on one of our Just Notice winter walks recently. My son was so excited because he saw this painted rock that somebody had purposely put there. They didn't leave it over from the summer. This was one that they placed there in the winter, and it was beautiful colors, all sorts of rainbow colors. And it said some nice words on it. And he was so excited. It was like a treasure hunt in this, vast white landscape. And that was something he noticed and caught his eye. And he was so excited to find it. And he was so glad that he saw it. And I wonder if the person who painted and left it there was thinking that it would bring such joy, but it did. And so sometimes I've seen little things in the community, and maybe you have too. Maybe you can contribute. I'm not, obviously a proponent of littering or anything like that, but there's nothing wrong with leaving little things, words, messages, things that are painted rocks, or things. I saw there were some kids recently for Valentine's Day that had little foam outline hearts, and they had written different words on them and hung them on the branches of trees along the walk. Those things are nice to see, and they do things for other people too. So if you're able to tap into that, that might speak to you. Reframing our ideas about winter. Now, it might sound like I was trying to be really, trying to pick all R words here. I wasn't. That's really, and I wasn't trying to do anything tricksy or anything like that. It's just that when I was thinking about what nature is like with winter, because my youngest son asked me, why do we even have winter? Why do we have to have winter? Why can't we just have nicer weather? He was having the grouchies about winter, as many of us can and do. And what was interesting was that my answer kind of even surprised me, because I'm like, well, it reminded me of course, the wisdom of nature, which is that we have spring where blossoms blossom, and we have trees, and we have all the other things. We have the glories of spring, and then we have summer, and we have all of our summer memories and what happens during summer. And then we have the fall, and all the glorious leaves change, and there's the harvest. But there has to be a period of time for rest in nature. That has to be. And that is what winter is. It's a period of time where trees aren't dead, but they are in rest mode. Everything is in rest mode. Birds go away. They don't like the weather. Things are in a period of rest, and things are in a period of time where we can reflect and where we can restore, and where at times we can recharge and we can renew, because then spring is coming, and that is when things are blossoming, and that's when we're ready for that, and nature is ready for that because it's had that time for rest. So sometimes, I don't know, maybe thinking about that is helpful for you too. It was helpful for me. I find I learned so much from from the people that I work with, that I enjoy so much, but I also, live so much and experience so much through the questions of my children, who ask so many questions or are curious about so many things, including, why do we even have to have winter? And it gets me thinking about, why do we have winter? Oh, right. I do remember hearing that in a science class way back when, that there's reasons for all of the periods of time in our life and cycles. And winter is one of them. That's a necessary one. Maybe it doesn't have to be so long. I could deal with that if it wasn't so long. Maybe you could too. Having some fun through the winter. And I included this just because I think it's a good reminder that there's lots of things that we can do for winter play. And I know there's lots of things posted on Instagram, and lots of things that we hear about, lots of community events that sometimes pull us into some winter activities. But here's just some things that I think are really great that might be reminders for you too, or things that you maybe already enjoy. So, really throwing yourself into, if you can, even if it's for a short period of time, in winter activities, such as going for a skate or skiing, which is a little tougher to access because you have to, usually you have to be somewhere. It's quite an event to get there. But for some people, it's not if you cross country ski. Some people just strap on their cross country skis and go. Snowshoeing, and a lot of these things you can rent equipment very easily. I know that because we've done that as a family many times. So it's not that you have to buy equipment in order to go. You can rent it, and it's quite affordable. Going on nature walks, which is something we love to do year round, but winter brings different things on nature walks, as we were talking about before. And because I have young children, something I love, and I actually got kind of a strange look actually not too long ago, because I dropped into the snow and did a snow angel beside my little boy. But having children gives me the ability to do that. I can play with crayons again. I can do snow angels in the snow. And I don't care so much about the looks from others, because I've let a lot of that go over time. I've had to learn to let that go, but it's also helpful to let that go over time, because it's more about trying to experience more of life. And sometimes other people might not be able, they're just not there, or that would look really strange to them, or they'd feel foolish or feel embarrassed. And maybe at times, maybe there are days where that will happen for me. Hasn't really happened yet though. I'm usually up for whatever my kids are doing I might very well do as well. And it's so fun when I do that. And so even if you don't have children, or if your children are all grown, you can think of what do children do in the wintertime? They really know how to play when it comes to snow time. You don't have to tell many kids how to build a fort or how to build a snow sculpture or build a snowman. Some of them might need, there might be wisdom from the ages that can help them with those things, but they tend to just gravitate towards these things. There's snow, let's do something with it. And so maybe thinking in that way could be helpful for you too. And I think the other thing is really creating fun indoor time. So like we were talking about before about having snow days, sometimes it's about creating a snow day. Maybe it's making a snow day. Maybe it's camping inside. Maybe you have sleeping bags in the living room and you eat some s'mores. Maybe it's a games night. Maybe it's dance parties. Maybe it's cook-offs or bake-offs between family members, as long as it doesn't get too competitive. And just being creative and having fun with it. I think that can be so helpful in terms of getting through some times and to bond with people that you love and bond with people, in the community. So, and a lot of these things can be done at any time of year, but sometimes it's kind of fun to conceptualize them as happening as maybe as winter specific things. Let's move on to some exercises that we could try. And we'll try a couple together. The first one is calm place. So what I'd like you to do, or I'd invite you to do, if it feels okay, is to sit back in wherever you're sitting and try and sit in a really supportive way. Sit back and relax your body as fully as you can. Relax your shoulders. Relax your legs. Notice the support of whatever you're sitting on. Try to have your feet on the ground so that you feel fully grounded where you are. And something we don't do very often is take full breaths. It's very uncommon, actually. I don't know if you've experienced this, but many of us take rescue breaths. It happens as a common phenomenon for most of us, but it's really because we haven't really taken too much of a deep breath. We've been breathing so shallowly for so long. Our body wants us to remember to take a full breath. So you might get like a really big breath and you're like, wow, that was a big breath I just took. That's your body's signal that maybe your breath was shallower for a period of time. Kind of an interesting factoid. But getting back to your breath right now, notice if you can make more of your breath come from your belly. Notice what it feels like to breathe in and have your belly expand. And then to breathe out and your belly falls. Notice the rise and the fall. And after you've done that a few times, you can think about a place where you have felt comfortable, calm, secure. And it might be a place in nature, it might be a place in your home, or even in your imagination that you'd like to visit. And really feel that place around you. As you think of that place, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? What do you sense in your body as you're in this place that makes you feel comfortable and calm? And what word comes to mind when you think of this place? It's going to remind you that this is a place where you can visit again when you need to. Maybe it's a word, maybe it's a symbol. What will remind you of this place? Now we're doing this exercise today in a very brief way, but you can do this for a few minutes. It doesn't take very long. And it can be quite helpful to bring us back to our breath, but also to connect us to a place that makes us feel calm, that makes us feel comfortable. And sometimes this can be helpful to do, maybe a time or 2 or 3 or more a day. For some people, it's really helpful to do before they go to bed, because there's so much stuff that happens that during the day that we might need to kind of unleash, but sometimes there's too much buildup if we wait until the end of the day. So it might be done at different times. And it's kind of an exercise that you can do anywhere, unless you're driving, of course. You don't want to be doing this and closing your eyes if you're driving. But you could do it in an office space. You could take a couple of minutes and do this. You could do it at school. You could do it in many different environments. And it can be very helpful for some. Next exercise we're going to do is called 4 elements. This one's a little more involved, and I'm going to invite you, it builds on the calm place exercise that we just did. And I'm going to invite you again to get even more settled in the space where you're sitting. It's a bit of a longer script, so I'm going to read it out. And I really just want you to, it's to get you back feeling into your body. It's a grounding exercise, but actually can also be quite calming as an exercise. And that can be very helpful to get us feeling more like ourselves at times. Reminds us of that breath. Reminds us of who we are. And sometimes that gets lost in a really, really busy time or a busy day. So starting with your feet, we begin with the first element, which is earth. Placing both feet on the ground, feeling the ground and the chair supporting you. Take a moment to land and be here. Look around and notice 3 things that you didn't notice before. And maybe you can take time to do that right now. What do you hear? What do you see? What do you notice? You are here now, and you are as safe as you can be in this moment. Going up your body as you settle again into your breathing with your eyes closed. Let's go to the second element, which is air. Notice your breathing. Breathe in through your nose, letting the air go all the way to your stomach as you count for 4 seconds. So let's give that a try. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Pausing. And then out, 2, 3, 4. And continuing to breathe in that way a few times. And reflecting on it without any effort. Just breathing more deeply and slowly, which generally helps us come back to ourselves, coming back to your center. Continuing up your body to the third element, water. Notice, is your mouth dry right now? Or do you have saliva in your mouth? When you are anxious or stressed, your mouth often dries up. But when you're making saliva, it's a sign that you're relaxing or beginning to relax. Take a few seconds to see if you can build more saliva to become more relaxed. Can you imagine the taste of a lemon? Try running your tongue over your teeth. Just notice as you make more and more saliva, as you think about these experiences. You might also notice that you have more and more focus and control over your thoughts and over your body as we go through the elements. With your feet on the ground, breathing more deeply and slowly, making more and more saliva, we move on to the fourth element, light. Bring up an image of a real or imagined place, situation, activity, person, or pet that helps you feel calm and as safe as you can be right now. And this could be called your calm place. Notice what you feel when you connect to it and how you feel in your body. practicing the 4 elements exercise, which we just did, can be done anytime, really. And it doesn't take that long to do. Again, it can be quite effective in terms of getting us grounded, especially if we're feeling really stressed. But for some people, this is way too long of an exercise. Some people need that. Some people can access that when they're feeling stressed. Some people can't. So if you're having difficulties in a particular time going through that entire exercise, it might be easier just to do the piece of calm place or the next thing that we'll review, which is box breathing. Box breathing, it seems like it couldn't do very much because it's a very simple exercise, but it's effective because of that, and because it has actually a change in what we do with our breathing, changes the way in which we perceive our thoughts and feelings in that moment, and how scary it is. When we are in a stressed fight or flight or flee or freeze response, it might be difficult to do many different things, especially wordy exercises or calm place. But we can do something with our breathing, and we can usually access that quite quickly. Box breathing allows for a very simple pattern so that it doesn't require much effort to remember or to recall. So that's part of why it can be really effective. And it slows our breathing down and actually engages us to breathe in a more full way. So box breathing is just as it is on the slide there. You basically inhale for 4 seconds, slowly. Then you pause gently for 4 seconds. Then you exhale for 4 seconds. And then you hold the breath out gently for 4 seconds. And it is important to hold the breath when you're at the point where you're holding the breath in or out, to do so calmly, because you don't want to tighten up. If you tighten up, your body senses that and says, no, I'm not going to shut down the stress response, because you're really super tense. So you do want to do this with the same setup of the exercise that we did before, where you're sitting and you're calm and you're supported and relaxed. Closing your eyes can often be really effective because it kind of tunes us inward and not focusing on the outside world for the time that we're doing that exercise. That's something you might want to try. And with box breathing, you would do it many times. Most people, I would say, find a sweet spot between 12 and 20 times that works really well for them. And so that one might be one that you want to try as well. And again, it can be done anywhere. People don't know whether we're breathing in or pausing or breathing out. It's more effective when you can close your eyes and take space to do it. But it can be done anywhere, really, with eyes open. And no one would know that you're doing box breathing. So it's a very accessible exercise. Now, we've talked about a lot of things today, and some of these might be helpful. Some of these things might be things you're already doing. But sometimes there are indicators where we need more support beyond doing some of these strategies that we've tried. Let's talk about some of the indications. So you might need some more support if you have a sense that within yourself that it might be helpful to talk with someone about your feelings. A lot of us sometimes have a difficult time talking about our feelings. So finding someone, either a psychologist like myself or some other mental health professional that you feel a good rapport with and that you feel like you can talk to and you feel like you have a good fit with, could be really important. And if you gravitate towards that, it might be something to consider doing. Especially if you feel like you need to stuff your feelings down or avoid feelings, which are actually very common responses for a lot of people. Unfortunately, though, as most of us have experienced, feelings don't stay stuffed down, and they can't be avoided forever, and they leak out in our lives, sometimes in the ways we don't want to see them leak out. So processing them and finding a way to work through them can be very helpful if you have the right person to work through those with. If you're feeling sad of the most of the time, All of us have days that are not our days, or we're feeling sad at times, but to feel sad most of the time, that's usually an indication that you might need more support. If you're feeling anxious or worried most of the time, if you're having periods of time where you're having racing thoughts and it's really hard to get off of the thoughts and feeling like it's too much, that might be another indicator for needing more support. If you're feeling like you're not enjoying things in your life as much as you used to, sometimes that can be an indicator. I used to get more joy when I did that activity, and now I don't. It feels like nothing, or I feel empty. Sometimes we change interests, but sometimes we know, we have an intuitive sense that that is something that should bring us joy, and it doesn't. Or we have a delayed response of like it's joy, but it's not what it was. That could be another indicator. If you're feeling stuck or lost, and those words come up a lot with the people that I see, where they're just feeling like something's not going right, or feeling overwhelmed or shut down. Those are also very common words. If you're feeling more tired than usual and your sleep patterns have changed, in some ways, winter can present challenges in terms of sleep, but if they're not improving, that might be something where someone can help with those sleep patterns and help get back to a different rhythm. If you notice your eating patterns have changed, some people really struggle with their eating patterns in the wintertime, either overeating or undereating. Sometimes they notice differences in their eating behaviors. So if there's things that are concerning you about that, another indicator that might be helpful to get some support. If you're feeling unmotivated, or withdrawn, or having trouble functioning in certain areas of your life, those might also be indicators. Another one is sometimes people will say to me that they're using more alcohol or other substances to try to cover up some of the feelings that they're feeling. And if that's something that you're experiencing, there's quite a big overlap between mood and mental health and using substances. So it might be something that you want to consider getting more support for. And also sometimes we receive feedback from others in our lives. Sometimes a spouse, children, friends, will reflect, you don't seem like yourself, or this is different about you. Normally this would happen. Sometimes others aren't, we have to always take it with a grain of salt, because sometimes others aren't completely within our inner world, and so they don't know all the pieces, right? And so they might say something in passing. It's like, no, I thought about it, and no, it's not, that doesn't really fit for me. But sometimes if we keep getting that reflected to us, or if it's somebody who we know really well and they're reflecting that to us, that might be another indication that some more support is needed and would be helpful. There are some areas where seeking help immediately is needed. So if you're feeling severely sad or severely anxious, or are having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, those are things that you should access immediately. And it can be really hard seeking support. I don't want to take away from that. I think that it's a very brave thing to do. And it's something that isn't necessarily culturally supported. As much as we know about mental health, and as much as mental health was kind of on the minds and hearts of people during the pandemic, it's a very, very difficult thing to make a call and to basically say, I can't handle this on my own, or to have that feeling. And a lot of us come from a place, whether that was something that we grew up with, or that's our culture, or a mixture of many different things, where we've been taught to kind of, no, you just get through things and just put your head down and just get through things, and don't just, somehow it's a sign of weakness if we're needing more support. And yet it's so human. Oftentimes, most people could benefit from support at times, because they're going through things too. And sometimes we might be convinced that other people aren't suffering just because they won't talk about it. But then again, sometimes we're not talking about it either. And we're not allowing others to maybe help in ways that they could. So if that's happening for you, please make sure that you reach out. I know it's hard to do that, but if you find, whether it's a family doctor that you trust and you've talked to forever and they can help direct you in the right way, or if it's a mental health professional like myself or whoever it is, that they can start. And it's much easier to start when we're in those earlier phases, when there's sadness and things. It gets very hard when we're in this slide where things are very severe and they've gotten to a point where it's very difficult. So, but oftentimes talking through feelings can be very helpful with the right person. So that's something I would encourage you to do. Some final thoughts. I hope that there were some things that were helpful for you in this presentation. And maybe there were some that you're already doing and you're like, oh gosh, she just reviewed everything that I'm already doing. So now I don't know what to do. But I hope it was helpful for you. And I think that Nicole will probably open the presentation up to questions.
Well, thank you, Kjariene.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Such a nice mix of, like, I felt really inspired, but also it was practical enough.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah. And I really needed both. I didn't want to
that's
reframe
good.
winter, but I have, despite myself, I have a bit of reframing that's happened, which is good.
Okay.
And also some strategies. Yeah.
Sure. That's good.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Other thoughts
Thanks.
from participants or questions or what's happening for you? Someone is saying, thanks for bringing me back to my forgotten centering.
Sounds great. Well, thanks.
Your comments? Always good to have someone is saying to review these strategies as winter comes back every year.
Yeah,
there's a really good return on our investment to spend time on thinking about winter.
Absolutely.
Inevitability of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially since winter is so long. It's a long season here. Really long. Yeah.
It's so interesting how just the commonality for humans. I mean, not everyone experiences winter the same way. I definitely have people in my life who really embrace it and they're very active. But I just feel like no therapist will ever say they want to do a webinar on surviving summer. Like, it's not trying to think desperately how we could extend it. No one would come because they're just trying to soak up every day outside. Someone is saying, thank you so much for this. It's been very helpful.
Great. Thank you.
And another comment, there is a lot more online info and webinars and support available online than there used to be. We can probably thank COVID for that.
That's yes. Hardly any of us did online sessions or online webinars before, but now we sure know how to.
Yeah, that's how it always was for us in person, and now webinar, although we might move back to a bit of both. Someone's saying the link for past webinars doesn't seem to be working on our website. Well, so just to make sure we're in the same place, if you go to our website, you actually go to the blog page and they're all there. Also, if you go to the Wellness Matters page for the upcoming ones at the bottom, all of the past ones are listed as well. But I'm, of course, really curious what link was broken. And I'm trying to think as I'm talking, was that a link you got in the email for this webinar or on the newsletter or somewhere else on the website? So if you can enlighten me, I'd love to fix that link, but that is where you can directly find it on our website. Good. Well, if you have, under events, past webinars. Okay. I'm definitely going to be fixing that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, join us anytime. We would love to see you in an upcoming webinar or workshop. If you're not on our newsletter list, you can sign up for that on our website. We have some really wonderful new in-person things that are going to be happening that will be free as well in the fall. So keep your eye open for that. And pitch for one more thing that we're doing. We're bringing Tarek Haddad from Peace by Chocolate to St. Albert. It's a beautiful story. You may have seen the movie of this Syrian family who came to Canada, and it will be a fundraiser for the food bank, and that's in October. But you can learn a lot about the Haddad family on our website under the events tab as well. And the tickets are on sale. And there'll be some other events about resilience that will be coming up in the spring for that too. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks again, Kjariene, for leading us in this.
Welcome.
And we'll catch up with everybody again soon, I hope. Take
Sounds
care.
good.
Have a good day.
Thank you. See you.